If you or someone you love suffers from substance use disorder, you've probably felt lost and scared on how to deal with it at times. And if you go to find answers or help, it's actually really hard to find because much of it is spread across many different sources. And I actually ran into this problem myself when my mother-in-law died. I started researching it because right before she died, I found out that substance use disorder is actually a mental illness, which is something I had not previously known. And also, much of what I thought I did know was completely wrong. I decided to turn the information I did find into a series of videos. I'm hoping that you can walk away from this series of videos with a better understanding of substance use disorder. That way you can help others and you can spread awareness of it actually being a mental illness. And I hope that by doing so that we can save lives, because this is a deadly mental illness. In this video, I'm going to help you understand the basics of substance use disorder, and I'm going to answer 11 different questions, and that includes what substance use disorder actually is, why it's considered a mental illness, which substances can be misused, and quite a few more. Before we get into the topic, I want to introduce myself for those that don't know me. My name is Randall from Coffee Pot Dad. And Coffee Pot Dad is for parents who are seeking a better life for their family, with informative YouTube videos that help answers parenting questions and offers tips so we can all grow as parents and have a happier family. Before we do get into it, I do want to let you know that there is timestamps in the description below that includes each of the questions I will be covering, and you can jump around at any time. But I do suggest you actually watch the video in its entirety because it will help you get the best understanding of substance use disorder. Also, be sure to stick around because this is the first video in a series of videos. There's going to be 3 more after this one, and I will discuss more of what's coming up in those videos, so be sure to stick around to the end on that. Now it's time to get on to the first question. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, a substance use disorder, or SUD, is a mental health disorder that affects a person's brain and behavior, leading to a person's inability to control their use of substances, such as legal or illegal drugs, alcohol, and medications. Symptoms can range from moderate to severe, with addiction being the most severe form of substance use disorder. Well, over time, continuous misuse or abuse of substances can change the brain in fundamental ways. As a result, a person's normal needs and desires can change and will be substituted with new priorities, such as gaining access and using substances. These brain changes actually challenges their self-control and interferes with their ability to resist intense urges to use substances. These inabilities to control impulses despite the consequences are similar to hallmarks of other mental illnesses, and that's also why substance use disorder is actually a very relapsing disease. Alcohol is the most common. Nicotine, prescription medications such as pain pills, stimulants, or anxiety pills. Methamphetamines, cocaine, opioids such as heroin and fentanyl, hallucinogens such as LSD, and inhalants such as paint gasoline, paint thinners, and hairsprays. And there's probably a whole bunch more too. It's actually very easy not to even know that there's a difference between misuse, abuse, and addiction, but I will explain the differences. Substance misuse is usually associated with prescription medications such as pain pills, anxiety medications, muscle relaxers. And these types of substances are actually meant to be used as directed by a doctor, because if you don't use them as they're supposed to, it can result in some bad side effects. Substance misuse includes taking an incorrect dose, taking at the wrong time, not taking a dose, stopping the use too early, taking for reasons other than it was actually prescribed, and taking something not prescribed to you at all. Misusing a substance alone is not considered a substance use disorder. However, substance abuse happens when a substance, including prescription drugs, illegal drugs, alcohol, and other substances, are misused to get high or inflict self-harm. Finally, substance addiction is the most severe form of substance abuse, and the most severe form of substance use disorder. It is so severe because it causes the uncontrollable use of a substance despite its consequences, and those that suffer have a physical or physiological need to take a substance because they often suffer intense or debilitating withdrawal symptoms when they go too long without a substance. It can also affect their relationships, jobs, health, and a whole lot more. To explain it in a different way, I have shoulder problems. Now, if I was to go to the doctor and get some pain pills or muscle relaxer or any such thing for my shoulder, and I took one of them, and after an hour or so, I was like, well, you know what, this isn't working. Well, if I were to take another one before it was actually time for me to, that is misusing the substance. I'm doing it to treat my shoulder, but that's the only reason. But if I was to take 2 or 3 or more of those pills at one time to either get high or to kill myself, that is abusing the substance. And really, although it seems like it's a thin line, that the intention is what really matters, and lying to yourself about that intention is not going to help anything. Now, if I were to abuse those pills day after day to maintain that high feeling because I felt as though I couldn't live without it, that would eventually evolve into addiction. If those pills and how they made me feel became more important than my family or my health, that is considered an addiction. If I saw that those pills were destroying my life, my finances, and all of that, and I felt as though I still couldn't stop despite of what it was causing, that is addiction. Truthfully, addiction is scary, and the scariest part is by the time that people realize they are addicted, they can't really do a whole lot about it. 10%, or roughly 26 million Americans over the age of 12 has a substance use disorder, excluding tobacco. If a teenager starts using an addictive substance before the age of 18, they are 6.5 times more likely to develop a substance use disorder than an adult using the same substances. This is simply due to the fact that their brain is still developing. So when a substance use is started this early, the brain becomes even more susceptible to absorbing its effects, remembering them, and then reminding the user to use the substance again. Genetics have shown to play a huge part as well. People who have a family history of substance use disorder are actually more likely to develop a disorder themselves. And it's also been proven that males are slightly more susceptible than women to starting a substance use disorder, although that trend is shrinking. And also, those that live where drugs and alcohol are more easily obtained are actually easier to develop a substance use disorder themselves as well. People often turn to substances for many different reasons. The most common reason for teens, of course, is peer pressure and to look cool in front of their friends. If their friends is doing it, they're going to want to do it too, or their friends will pressure them into doing it. Some adults start using drugs or alcohol to cope with the symptoms of pre-existing mental disorders such as anxiety, depression, and bipolar disorder. Some other factors that might lead people to starting include a family history of addiction, sleeping problems, chronic pain, trauma, financial difficulties, divorce or relationship issues, loss of a loved one, long-term tobacco habit, a bad home environment, and lack of parental attachment in childhood. For the record, none of these factors nor any combination of these factors guarantees that anyone will actually develop a substance use disorder. But a combination of some of these factors plus repeated use of the substances increases the likelihood of somebody developing a disorder. Although there's been a whole lot of research done on substance use disorder since the 1930s, there's still not much known about it. It's still not really known why people start. Although, as previously said, genetics probably plays a huge part in a person's risk of developing a disorder. However, the repeated use of a substance and the tolerance somebody would develop over time could actually also impact the chances of someone developing a substance use disorder and addiction. My mother-in-law had a substance use disorder, and I'm going to actually tell her story in the next video, so make sure you come back to listen to that. But for now, I will tell you that she was in chronic pain. She had a very bad back, and she also had several cases of trauma in her life. She was beat, robbed, and raped, and that all happened at different times. And then she lost family members, including her husband and two of her brothers, and she smoked a lot. And there ain't no telling what else was going on with it that I don't personally know about. And although I can't tell you when she started or why she started, I can tell you that she struggled with it for a long time, and that was way before my wife was born. And the one thing I want you to understand is that even though I can't tell you why she started or anybody else starts, I can tell you that she nor anyone else started to become addicted. No one ever plans to become addicted. This actually goes back to some of the previous topics. Those that have a greater number of risk factors have a greater chance of developing a substance use disorder than those that have fewer risk factors. And again, this isn't a guaranteed thing, but it is the case more often than not. Once someone develops a substance use disorder and becomes dependent on a substance, there's actually a physical changes that happens in parts of the brain that are very important for judgment, making decisions, learning and memory, and controlling behaviors. So the more someone uses, the more the brain believes that it's hard for them to feel okay without the substances, and it becomes harder and harder for them to stop using. There's also the fact that some substances can cause a massive surge of dopamine or a pleasure sensation in the brain. The dopamine release can be 2 to 10 times higher than natural rewards, and the sensation usually lasts much longer, and the brain usually releases the dopamine a whole lot quicker than natural rewards as well. The release can actually be so strong and give the body such a pleasurable sensation that the brain simply wants more of it once it starts to wear off. And since it is a greater feeling than natural rewards, after a while the brain wants more and more of it to produce the same feeling. Our brains are actually wired to encourage us to repeat activities that trigger the release of dopamine, and it's hard for anyone to turn it off. And that's a huge reason why it's so hard for people to stop once those changes start happening in their brain. Before we get to the last question, if you've found any value in this video so far, please give it a like so more people can get this video to help them better understand substance use disorder. This is probably one of the biggest questions in this video because we all know somebody that has struggled and always wondered why they can't get help. There's a number of reasons, but there's 3 big ones that I'm going to discuss today, and that's denial, shame, and fear. Denial is actually one of the biggest factors that allows addiction to thrive. Many people who go through addiction either believe they don't have a problem at all or believe that they can handle it by themselves without anybody helping them. Another way that denial can come into play is the fact that substance use disorder can cause problems in their life. They could easily grow apart from their family and lose their job and experience other hardships. They don't want to blame their substance use disorder, they want to blame it on others. My mother-in-law actually did that very thing to my wife. She blamed her for many of her problems which she had nothing to do with. And to the best of my knowledge, she also denied the fact that she ever had a problem. And she turned down several attempts from her family to help. Most people don't understand substance use disorders due to the misconceptions that the public holds. A lot of movies and TV shows users or junkies, as they like to call them, as all being terrible people, and that's simply not the case. This is actually terrible for anyone suffering from substance use disorder because it creates a stigma of shame. And as I'm sure you know, shame is very overwhelming and powerful emotion, and no one actually wants to feel that. That actually creates another barrier for people suffering from substance use disorder to get help because they feel or fear of feeling shame, and then they will feel as though they're not worthy of help, and often that makes them feel as though have no reason to get help or to seek help or to turn their life around. I believe over time, fear of seeking help might be the hardest hurdle to get over. And that's simply down to the fact that The first fear they will likely feel is that they won't feel normal anymore. You gotta remember, in most cases, they started using to get rid of some kind of pain or trauma in their life. Then they had to overcome the fear of admitting that they have a problem. Then they had to overcome the fear of being shamed. And then they had to overcome the fear of rehab or detox, which in itself can be very uncomfortable because of all the changes your body has to go through. Then they had to overcome the fear of therapy, which can unearth feelings and memories that they have buried for years. Then on top of all of that, they will likely fear of relapsing. It'll be even worse if someone's been through it all already and has relapsed. And then they had to fear of relapsing again on top of everything else. And truthfully, a lifetime commitment to sobriety, especially when you have a substance use disorder, is a very daunting and scary, because substances go a long way in helping them feel like a normal person once they've had all this stuff going on with them. And they were basically giving all of that up. The stress and fear associated with quitting and getting help could also trigger another stress factor in their life, and that might make them use even more. In conclusion, I honestly believe that if America lost the stigma surrounding substance use disorder, it would help open a lot of doors for those that suffer from it to get the help that they actually need, and it would save a whole lot of lives in the process. And that's why this series of videos is being made, because I want to break the stigma associated with substance use disorder. And these 11 questions covered in this video only scratches the surface of what people need to know about substance use disorder. Be sure to come back for the remaining 3 videos in the series so you can learn even more and possibly help even more. In the next video, I'm going to focus on how substance use disorder can affect the family. And then in the 3rd video, I'm going to shatter a lot of misconceptions surrounding substance use disorder by putting myths against facts. Finally, in the 4th and final video, and arguably the most important one, I'm going to tell you how to help those suffering from substance use disorder. So again, please come back and watch those, because all 4 videos are important.